Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, we're going to talk about the male body part women notice in seconds. Now, before we go ahead and jump into that, a lot of people ask me, is it the pelvis region of a male's body? And that is one of the most common areas that women notice almost immediately, but that is not the first one that she notices. Today, we're going to talk about the main areas that a woman notices. We're going to talk about 3 different types of research, different articles of research that is in the description box, as well as a survey that actually women filled out. It is a self-reported survey that is actually different from what the research shows, which I think is interesting because particularly for me, I trust research, not necessarily self-reported surveys, at least not as much. And I think that's what I thought was very interesting, because maybe women don't even realize this is actually what they're looking at, because most likely it's subconscious. Now, that region that women look at is actually the upper body, and in particular the chest. But let's just talk about the upper body in general. There are lots of regions of a man, the upper body, that women look at in general. That would be the neck. That would also be shoulders. Not just shoulder width, but also both directions of shoulders. So what would be the width and then the thickness, I suppose, is the best way to put it, at least for now. Arms, upper arms more particular, but some do look at the forearm area here. Some women look at veins, which I thought was very interesting. And I do recall that was something. But most particularly, based on all of the studies, but one study we're going to talk about, the one in 2017, this study found that a woman's eye movement, when she's looking at a man, the first area that her eyes tend to land on is the chest, and then followed by the rest of the upper body, the head, and then midriff area. And this indicates a visual bias, actually, towards the upper body features. And from a psychological perspective, that is indicated, not just psychological, but also biological, right, as physical strength. Another study that was also in the description box is participants, and particularly the women, and I'm looking at that part, often fixated on the face, but they first showed attraction and interest with the chest and pelvic regions, right? And I mentioned that the pelvic region is one of them. And so what we can see is that women don't really look at the face first, but she does fixate on it more. But in terms of increased attention, she will glance more often at these areas. So the chest and the pelvic region, whereas the face, it's going to be more static viewing, if that makes sense. However, the first area is the chest that she sees. So the top areas that women actually look at is the upper body, particularly the chest, the face, and the pelvic region. And this suggests that women don't always look at faces when they first evaluate a partner for intimacy, particularly in the bedroom, but in general. Connecting with a man, it's going to be a couple of these areas she evaluates, not just his face, okay? And why is this important? Why does this matter, okay? From an evolutionary psychological perspective, the upper body, particularly the chest, shoulders, etc., does signal strength. It typically does, and it does also signal a healthy physical condition, okay? And what we see with the face is the face offers social cues like eye contact, emotional expression, and it helps her to read who he is. And so this is an evaluation. And so these particular components, and also the pelvic region, from a biological perspective, a lot of times people are just trying, for her, it signals that she's interested in him making in advance. Does that make sense? And so these features are both biologically and socially relevant. This is not just for confidence for men, but also for women to understand who is she signaling and what's going on. And so that if she is interested in a man, that these are some of the things she's probably doing, or if she's not doing, he has no idea that she's interested. Some of those things can make a difference, okay? Interesting enough, as we talked about those self-reported I don't even know if I want to call it studies, surveys, it does show something different. And I think this is where I think we can put a little bit of a stop on and explore why this is occurring, right? Because it does show that a lot of people have a little bit of lack of self-awareness, as we all do, about truly what we notice first. Because we don't pay attention to ourselves nearly as much as if researchers are just sitting there and observing people, right? It's going to be very hard to, because we have our own personal bias. What we notice is in the self-reports, ladies actually say that they notice eyes and smile first, along with other features including height. However, the research does not show that. The research shows upper body, particularly the chest. It does show his face, and then it also shows his pelvic region. These are areas that her eyes are actually making emphasis on, and not just emphasis. There is repeated glances or a fixation. Fixation typically is the face. Repeated glances is the chest and pelvic region. And this does not necessarily mean that what women are reporting is incorrect. What it could mean, and this is kind of based on speculation, my own speculation, but you guys are welcome to speculate why it's different, is because very likely what she remembers more is his eyes and smile instead of his shoulder width or his face or his pelvic region. That might be something that maybe she's just checking to make sure from a biological perspective, but once passing those markers, there's another set of her understanding, which is maybe his eyes and smile. That's how I took it. I'm actually curious how you guys take it, the difference between the research and the self-reports, and what do you think that means about female attraction and the connection between how we perceive ourselves comparison to how we perceive others. I find that very interesting, okay? The research is all in the description box, but there are some notes I want to talk about the research particularly. Let's start with the one in 2017. This one has the strongest direct evidence for where women visually attend or perceive or look at on a man's bodies. And this is used like eye tracking. And this one actually shows the most significant for the chest, but in general, we see that torso area. The next one is very interesting. This 2013 actually supports findings about face versus body. And this was the one that I was mentioning. Male and female is both in this research. I just looked at the women one because a lot of you guys asked this question, particularly about ladies. And it shows that, as we were discussing earlier, she will have her eyes almost dart around his chest area and his pelvic region. So I know it sounds strange, and I'm not trying to frighten anybody or make anybody uncomfortable, but it's not like she's staring directly at the pelvic region or your chest area. And I hope not. I'm sure that would make you guys pretty uncomfortable. I could be wrong, but likely what the research shows is she takes quick glances continuously, but with your face, she will actually have a more fixated, not just posture, but also usually this is also eye contact that is created here, okay? And the research in 2009 actually supports foundational. The reason I like this one, this is not necessarily for these particular dynamics, but it is just a foundational methodology, right? The eye tracking. Basically, we can see that there is relevance to using this technique for, I guess, body region attention, like specifically looking at a person's particular places on their body. So that's the reason I put that in there, because it's a foundational research based on 2013, which was that one face versus body, and then 2017, which is very particular about the male body. And so these are some of the ways that if a woman is doing this, yes, there is a lot of attraction on her side. And just because a survey says something, we can see that research actually says something different. So I don't know about you, but I trust research more. I could be wrong. I could change my mind. But I hope this video is helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I will see you in the next one.